Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Federation Council and our public meeting information session for development application 2020/162 for a proposed 335 lot subdivision in Corowa. So presenting under COVID-19 restrictions, so I do feel a bit awkward here. I've got my face to the camera, but in the room with us we have a number of council staff and a number of speakers who have registered to speak. So they will come forward later and speak to the meeting as well. So my name's Adrian Butler, General Manager at Federation Council, and I'd like to thank those who are logged in, attending and watching online, as well as those in person. And I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we are meeting today, the Bangarang people. And I'd like to acknowledge on behalf of Council the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who now reside in this area, and I extend that respect to elders past, present and emerging of the Bangarang nations and any other nations who now reside here. So without any further ado, I'll hand over now to a presentation from Susan Appleyard, our Assessing Officer for this DA. Thank you.
Thanks, Adrian. Good evening, everyone. Just bear with me a minute while I share my screen with you all. I've got a short presentation here which outlines where we're at to date with the application. So as all of you would know, we received the development application for the 335 lot subdivision here in Corowa. So the history behind this, on the 6th of November 2019, preliminary plans for the subdivision were provided to Council. On the 21st of November that year, Council officers met with the applicant to discuss the information required for the application. On the 1st of May 2020, plans and information were provided to Council for a pre-lodgement assessment. On the 27th of May, comments from the assessment staff provided to the applicant regarding errors or omissions within the presented documentation was provided to the applicant. On the 5th of August, the application was lodged and processed via Federation Council's clearinghouse process. A capital investment value was requested as a result of the review at the clearinghouse stage. So therefore, on the 24th of August, an tax invoice for the fees were issued to the applicant. On the 9th of September to the 7th of October, the application was exhibited by way of notification to adjoining and adjacent landholders. It was advertised in Council's website, in the Corowa Free Press and on a site notice on Redlands Road, Corowa. During the exhibition period, a total of 121 submissions were received. On the 12th of October, copies of these submissions were provided to the applicant in accordance with privacy legislation. On the 11th of November 2020, a request for additional information was sent to the applicant. On the 22nd of December, a first-class proceedings were lodged by the property owner in the New South Wales Land and Environment Court. On the 4th of January 2021, that should be, Federation Council received notification of the Class 1 proceedings. On the 11th of February this year, a final request for the additional information requested on the 11th of November was made to the applicant. So we'll go through what was discussed at the pre-lodgement meeting. On the 27th of May, the pre-lodgement assessment asked for a total of 17 items to be reviewed before lodgement. Some of these were to ensure that all plans matched, to ensure the designs provided were for the correct development and town, to ensure the development was clearly defined, to ensure all facilities were included and measurements provided for roads, bus stops, street trees and driveways. Information regarding traffic counts, flows and conflict management were requested. More information regarding social impact of the proposed development and the impact of the development on sloan froglet habitat. Sewer and water demand calculations regarding future load and demand requirements for the subdivision were requested. And it was also questioned whether they would be requesting a speed limit review for Redlands Road from Council's Traffic Committee. So moving on to the submissions that were made during the exhibition period, they range from one-line opposition or singular concerns through to several page submissions regarding the overall impact the development will have in Corowa. The following slides provide the main issues raised in the public submissions. The number one concern was regarding overdevelopment of the site and lot sizes are too small. The second was traffic impact. Third, social impact. Fourth, inadequate green space. Fifth, compliance with Cora LEP and DCP requirements. 6, impact on the environment. 7, concerns about the ability of Cora sewage treatment plant to accept the additional load from the proposed development. 8 was interesting that people were in favour of the development but not in its current form. 9, economic impact of the development, and 10, lack of room for car parking. Other concerns or valid concerns that were raised were crime prevention, pedestrian safety, stormwater control, impact on amenity, the need for the development and the demand, noise issues in its close proximity to the industrial area, referral requirements under Murray REP2, visual impact and future development controls. In light of this and in light of the assessment undertaken by staff and as a result of other submissions received from agencies, additional information was requested from the applicant on the 11th of November 2020 and re-requested on the 11th of February 2020 reply. A reply from the applicant on the 15th of February advised the owners exercising their right to commence Class 1 proceedings under the Land and Environment Court, but did not address the request for additional information. So this is the information that was requested regarding agency concerns. Now that came from Heritage New South Wales and also from Department of Primary Planning, Industry and Environment regarding biodiversity. We also requested information regarding compliance with Corowa Local Environmental Plan 2012, an assessment under the State Environmental Planning Policy Koala Habitat Protection 2019, which has since been repealed and replaced with a new set for 2020. Compliance with Development Control Plan, notably Chapter 2 Residential Development and Subdivisions. We also requested information regarding engineering standards that were asked to be addressed after the first assessment was undertaken. We also asked for the applicant to review over the 100 submissions that were received and to attend a public meeting. This didn't occur and we're now at the point where we're in a Class 1's proceedings. Directions hearings were held on the 25th and the 1st of February. Federation Council have appointed Kelmore solicitors to represent council in this matter and have also appointed Silvestro Planning to prepare the facts and contentions on behalf of council. These facts and contentions are due to be presented to the court and to the applicant on the 26th of February. On the 19th of March, the applicant will provide a response to these facts and contentions, and on the 31st of March, there will be an without prejudice meeting between the applicant and the respondent. The conciliation conference will be online and has been set for the 4th of May. For the public, the reports will be continued to be provided to council regarding this process and will be available to any member of the public. I'll hand back to Adrian.
Thank you, Susan, for that outline and very good background and history of where the development application is up to. I'd now like to call forward our public speakers and to come forward and present to the microphone. Susan, we have, is it 5 minutes per speaker? And we will be issuing a 4-minute buzzer, but yeah, we would ask people if they could stick to the time of 5 minutes. So first speaker up, could I please have Steve Kent? Thank you. That's not the other one.
Okay, so yeah, look, I'm Steve Kent. I'm a concerned community member, which is why I'm here tonight. I first raised my objection to this development several months ago, and that objection was based on a number of grounds. But tonight I'm just going to concentrate on one of those particular matters. So here goes. 335 new households, a potential increase of 15 to 25% of our current population. How is our community going to be able to accommodate the development of this magnitude? Economically, where will these people work, or how will they support themselves financially? Socially, will our public facilities be able to service their needs? And culturally, will they be able to assimilate into country life and embrace our local character? My question is a fairly simple one then, and I'm certainly not going to use my 5 minutes. It is mainly the size of the development which is causing, I believe, undue stress on our community as it stands today. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. I'd now like to call forward Aaron Nichols for your presentation, please. Aaron.
Thanks, Adrian. Good afternoon. My name is Aaron Nichols and I am a Director at the Registered Architecture Practice Regional Design Service based in Corowa. I'm also a founding member of the Corowa Community Action Group. There are 3 main points which I'd like to discuss today and will aim to do so as succinctly as possible. Thank you to Federation Council staff for this opportunity. I do so on behalf of myself as a resident and a business owner and a community representative. I'm a 6th generation local. Access to green space. There are many fine examples of how the integration of bike and walking paths leading to or passing through tracts of green space, parks, can improve the health and well-being of residents and visitors to an area. Pocket parks and children's play areas increase community connection and support neighbourhoods which are welcoming, connected and safe. Behavioural economists argue that improving neighbourhood walkability can nudge people of all ages into increased activity by making walking the easiest option possible. That source is from Robert and Kouachi from a paper from 2016. The application submitted to Council by Habitat Planning notes that in item 3.5 of the existing water retention ponds, dams, on the northern and southern development areas are considered adequate for recreation purposes. However, there is no mention of how this will be achieved. These are being proposed as public reserves, yet have no associated landscaping plans, that is no marked walking tracks, no bike paths, no exercise, picnic or play equipment, and no planting guide or precedent images. Whilst we acknowledge that there is a connection to existing tracts of space in both the northern and southern development areas, the southern park in particular is in a poor state of presentation, infested with weeds and bindies, and includes ageing and outdated play equipment. As the father of a 9-year-old, this park is unsafe and not fun. This is unacceptable. We call on the developer to revise the application to include sustainable green spaces which actively seek to promote and maintain community cohesion, happiness, health and well-being. Point 2, no requirement for a landscaping plan in the application. As previously stated, the landscaping of parks, precincts and nature strips can dramatically improve the health and well-being of residents. With one local example, Silverwoods Estate in Yarrawonga, showing best practice on how a modern and creative approach to landscaping can add amenity, value and attractiveness with small lots. Again, I refer to Robert and Karachi's notes on walkability. The development application notes that Council confirmed during the lodgement discussions that a landscaping plan is not required to be presented at this part of the development, which is concerning considering Council's own engineering guidelines, Part 6, 4.1, state that prior to development of a landscape concept, it is recommended that the developer carry out preliminary discussions with Council regarding an existing landscape features and concepts that will reinforce the character of the area and preserve local habitat. I was encouraged to see that question was put back to the Developer Council. Thank you. Given the scale of this development, its proximity to open farmland, the lawn cemetery, significant old growth trees on Cemetery Road, and importantly, the stormwater channel systems which lead directly into the Murray River via Croppers Swamp, we request that a landscape plan is provided before approval is considered. We propose that the developer modifies the design to reduce the number of lots, diversify their size and include best practice approaches to public green space. There is also the issue of how each lot might be divided from the next, that is fences. Currently, there is no standard listed for the fence types, material or height. Suppose that the standard colour bond option is opted for and that each lot is fenced in on 3 sides at 1800 millimetres high. The average square metres of metal per property is 212 square metres. Multiply this by the number of lots and we reach a staggering 75,260 metres of steel. My final point, spatial justice. In 2009, the acclaimed political geographer and urban theorist Edward Soja compiled a groundbreaking discussion paper on the topic of spatial justice. In summary, it says that spatial injustice refers to an intentional and focused emphasis on the spatial or geographical aspects of justice and injustice. As a starting point, this involves the fair and equitable distribution in space of socially valued resources. What this means, and it poses the question, why should we be forcing people into small lots because of how much money they have? It is on this basis that we insist that the current development is not approved until greater consideration is given to variation in lot sizes, varied sustainable approaches to green spaces are considered and designed in, covenants are considered for building types, materials and quality standards, so as to create a community precinct which is vibrant, safe and thriving, and is environmentally and financially sustainable. And finally, a proposal which is put forward that seeks to deliver the best possible social, environmental and financial outcomes for the developer, the purchaser and the surrounding community. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. Now let's call up the next speaker, Philip Nielsen.
Hi everyone, so I'm Philip Nielsen and I'm a registered architect, co-owner of local business Regional Design Service and a resident of Corowa. I'm also a representative of the recently formed Corowa Community Action Group. Thank you Federation Council for facilitating this meeting and providing an update on the Redlands Road development. There are 3 main points I'd like to address today. The first being the perceived applicant disregard for community voices. Based on the request for further information issued to the applicant by Federation Council, a copy of community submissions were provided to the applicant with recommendations of the applicant to participate in a community meeting to alleviate concerns. I note that the applicant is an absent participant in today's meeting, but agents acting on their behalf are likely watching from afar. From my perspective, the approach of the applicant to pursue this case with the Land and Environment Court rather than collaborate with council and community to resolve concerns speaks to their complete disregard of delivering a complying design outcome for Corowa. Second point, lot widths. Of the 335 proposed lots, 47%, almost half, are proposed to have a lot width that does not comply with the Corowa Development Control Plan's 15-metre minimum lot width. Based on this alone, the developer should revise their plans to meet the minimum lot width. Third point, solar orientation. In addition to the non-compliance of lot widths, 116 of the proposed non-compliant lots have an east-west orientation, which will result in reduced solar gain for future residents of the precinct. To mitigate poor solar orientation of developments like this one, the Corowa Development Control Plan requests that east-west allotments need to be wider than the minimum 15 metres width to provide greater opportunity for solar access to yards and living areas. In closing, the development in its current iteration should be rejected for not complying with minimum lot widths or poor east-west orientation of those lots. If this proposal in its current state is approved, it will set a very poor precedent for future development in the Federation Council region, in turn signalling to developers that basic design conditions within the Corowa Development Control Plan can be flagrantly disregarded. Thanks again for the opportunity to speak, and I look forward to Council's response.
Thank you, Philip. Could I now call forward Robert Pearce?
My name is Robert Pearce and I'm also a member of the Corowa Community Action Group, which has recently been formed due to the extreme concern raised by the community in regards to this development. I do not believe that this represents low-density residential development and does not meet the R2 objectives of either the LEP or the Corowa Local Development Control Plan. Interestingly, Soon after this development was proposed, I happened to be talking to a very experienced land valuer, and I showed him a copy of the plans for the development. And without batting an eyelid, he just straight away said, that is not low density residential development. The applicant seems to have forgotten that the minimum lot size is a minimum lot size only and not the suggested lot size for all lots within the development. There is absolutely no transition between the adjoining land and the proposed development. The lots that are already being developed closer to town are actually much bigger than proposed in this new development, and the R2 zone on the other side of Cemetery Road has a minimum lot size of 1 hectare or 10,000 square metres. So I don't see how there's any transition at all. Also, clearly there is a need for a landscape plan given that they've applied to remove all existing vegetation. Another concern is direct access to Redlands Road from the lots to the north of the development. This is a very busy road carrying many B doubles, and is only by trying to get more lots into the given area that has necessitated these lots to access the road directly. There are a number of environmental risks that I'm aware of that this development proposes, given that my family has lived just downstream of Croppers Lagoon since 1910. I feel that the development should be referred to the various agencies under MREP2 under stormwater drainage scheme, since all stormwater that leaves this development will go across to the Scone Lane drain and directly into Croppers Lagoon and the Murray River. The stormwater management plan that the developers have proposed is flawed from day one in that they've used the wrong rainfall figures, which they admit are lower than Corowa's rainfall figures and less than half of the heaviest rainfall ever recorded in Corowa. The notional detention time from the two stormwater dams are 0.96 hours from one and 1.66 hours from the other, yet the recommended detention time is 48 to 72 hours. So how they could claim that this will give adequate treatment of the stormwater is beyond me. I also have concerns whether or not the sewage treatment works can accommodate such a large increase of demand proposed by the development. Once again, any water that leaves the sewage treatment works into the environment will once again go down Scones Lane and into the Murray River at Croppers Lagoon. In 2011, it was stated that the treatment works needed replacement within the next 6 to 8 years. Now, 10 years later, nothing has changed, and it is to be reviewed over the next 2 years. All these matters need to be dealt with at the DA stage, as indicated by a recent Western Regional Planning Panel briefing in regards to another development in the Shire. It was stated it can't be left to be dealt with in conditions of consent. However, it has not been possible for Council to deal with this because of the refusal by the applicant to provide this information when requested. I'd like to thank Council for this opportunity to speak and look forward to working with Council where possible to protect the community's interest as this matter progresses through the Land and Environment Court. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Now call forward Alan Prentice. Where are you going?
Thank you, Adrian. Unlike some of the speakers we've already heard from, I'm a new resident to Corowa, and I moved to Corowa for the country living and a number of other reasons. But in my last area of employment, I worked for the Mornington Peninsula Shire Council. Their mantra was, "We are not Melbourne." I would put it to you that Corowa is not Sydney. It is also not Albury-Wodonga. Now, to the issues that I see, the major issue is the lot sizes, which has already been touched on. There needs to be an adequate range of lot sizes, up to and including the 1 hectare that's been referred to by a previous speaker. I propose or put to you that the average lot size should be more like 1,000 square metres, not 550. On the question of frontages, 15 metres is not sufficient to allow access to the rear of properties down the side of a house. I would propose that a minimum of 17 is needed for this purpose. Corowa residents, existing and future, will want to come here to live the country lifestyle. That includes owning a boat, owning a caravan, owning a camper van. These would need to be stored in the backyards of properties, hence the need to get access to the backyard of these properties. The other area that I have major concerns with, which relates to my previous experience as a traffic engineer and transport planner, is the traffic impacts report that was provided with the development. This report is deficient in 2 major areas and underestimates the future traffic that will be generated by this development. Firstly, they've used a traffic generation rate of 7.5 vehicles per household per day. This is based on reference to a Roads and Marines document, which is out of date, which refers to the ability to reduce it to this figure if there is significant internal traffic generation. The proposed area of the development has no internal traffic generators. There is no local shop. There are no childcare centres. There are no schools located within this area. So the traffic generation rate needs to be at least 10 vehicles per day per household, which is nearly 33% higher than the figures used by the developer. In addition, the assessment overlooks the fact that the developer does not own all of the land within the development area. There are other significant parcels of land which will contribute to the future traffic in this area when those additional areas are developed. The parcels of land I'm referring to are 121 to 141 Cemetery Road, 161 to 163 Redlands Road, 157 to 159 Redlands Road, and 15 Jasmine Court, which all have future development potential and will add traffic to the roads in this area. That's all I'd like to say at this stage, but I agree with many of the other comments made by the other presenters, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you, Alan. Could I now call forward Peter Wright?
My name is Peter Wright. I'm a Corowa resident and a member of the newly formed Corowa Community Action Group. Previous speakers have addressed some of the procedural and regulatory concerns regarding this development. I share those real concerns. Issues like block widths being below minimum requirements, stormwater and sewage concerns, lack of green space, perceived non-compliance to standards are all valid concerns that need to be addressed. So rather than repeat those concerns, I'd like to speak more on the social aspects of allowing this development to proceed in its current format. I must also state I'm all for growing our community through appropriate development. The current desire of people to migrate from major cities to regional areas, partly due to the COVID situation, presents a wonderful opportunity for communities like ours to attract that segment of the population. The Corowa housing landscape for decades has long enjoyed a diversity in block sizes that have met the needs of community for home ownership, as well as providing varied rental opportunities. This variation in dwelling options throughout the town has contributed significantly to the positive social growth and community wellbeing in our town. It is this variation that will continue to attract people to our community. I absolutely appreciate the changing goals in home ownership for many people. The big backyard for many is no longer desirable or fits their lifestyle. I get that. That is why it's so important to continue to have variations in block sizes, especially within a development application on this massive scale. This is the largest single residential building development in our Shire's history. There is no demonstrated community need or demand for 335 small developments concentrated on 2 sites within the town. The proposal does not fit into existing scale, density and the character of the surrounding residential area. This is a major concern and is a requirement of any residential development. There isn't enough time to talk now about what I believe are some of the serious issues regarding traffic movement within this development. Many households have at least 2 vehicles per household. The potential for significant congestion and friction between neighbours within the proposed site should not be underestimated. Provision for school bus access and domestic waste removal also needs to be clarified. It is a proven fact that concentration of small block sizes will generate negative social outcomes and unrest for the local population. This has been proven in several communities and regional towns. This sort of social disruption has a negative impact on the entire community. This development is not in Corowa's best interest. I believe it is therefore incumbent on our elected councillors and staff to ensure that our community futures are not negatively affected or impacted by approving this development in its current format. It should be further noted that if this development is improved in its current format, it will set a dangerous precedent for future developments within the Shire. It is interesting to note that a Mulwala subdivision application before council on the Togamore Road, I think it's DA 2020-37, has exactly the block size variation that would be far more appropriate for the Redlands Road proposal. I urge the community to strongly voice its views on this development through their local elected officers. If allowed to proceed as proposed, the full impact of this development may not be felt in the relatively short term, but by the time it is completed, and if other developers have used this model as a precedent to do the same, it will irreversibly change the fabric, social integrity and nature of our wonderful Murray River community. I sincerely hope and expect that Federation Council does all within its power to ensure that this development does not go ahead in its current format. This development application must either be modified and be fully compliant in all areas or rejected. Approval as it is would be a terrible local government legacy for our currently elected councillors and staff to leave behind for generations to come. The voice of our community must be heard and listened to by Federation Council. It has occurred in the past in several developments and must continue to be listened to going forward. Thank you.
Might forget speakers list there. We've got many left. Thanks, Peter. Do we have Neil Smith? Yeah. Yep. Thanks, Neil.
Thanks, Adrian. My name's Neil Smith. I was born in Corowa and I live in Chisnell Street. I had to wait 5 years to be able to build my home in Chisnell Street, just waiting for rezoning and stuff like that, but I really wanted a decent sized block. I wanted a block that I could fit a reasonable sized house in for my family to grow in. I was the first house in the subdivision and we had wonderful homes being built in stage 1 all around us. The developer couldn't sell the blocks that were left in stage 2, so sold all remaining blocks to an investment group in Queensland. So all of the blocks were only built for rentals. The block sizes were good, but the house designs, there was only three or four house designs in the whole second stage of the subdivision and only built for investments, as I mentioned. This devalued my house dramatically and all of those around me. It forced by only being rentals. There were so many young people in there speeding, and we had a lot of young children in stage 1, and it created a really dangerous situation for everyone involved, to the point where we formed a group and were involved with the council and the RTA and the police, looking at issue and maybe reducing the speed limit within Chisnell Street. It created the properties not being kept, no gardens or any care for the area. And you can see that by driving through stage 1 and stage 2 of the current Chisnell Street subdivisions. It created a massive increase in police presence, needing to visit homes within the rental area. And it's often referred to by community residents as the Bronx. So I am not against progress. I welcome it and I want it. I was born here. I've chosen to raise my family here, and I love our community. I'm not against the subdivision, a new subdivision near me. I expect it. I expected that when all the land was rezoned. What it needs to do though, is it needs to suit Corowa's community and the needs of who and what we are. We need house lots where you can build a family home, have a shed, maybe a pool, and some grass for your kids to be able to run around. We also do need small blocks where people can come and retire and build a townhouse, but there needs to be a range. I would have thought, somewhere between the 550 and 11 to 1200 square metres needs to be the minimum range that's around. We obviously need gardens and space like all the speakers before me have mentioned. So I thank Council for the opportunity to speak today, and I know that there are a lot of other community members that share my views. Thanks.
Now, do we have one more speaker?
Did any of you want to sum up? No.
I'll let it crack in.
Okay. Peter? Yeah, thanks.
I'd just like to say that I think it's become evident as the different speakers have spoken that there's no one in this room that is against development. What we're looking for is a progressive and suitable development that fits in with the current residential mix in that area. And that's all we're looking for. And it's not unreasonable to expect council to absolutely pursue this to the nth degree to ensure that the community needs and the community welfare is looked after. So it's not about development, it's just about ensuring that we don't put something into the community that is not in the community's long-term interest. This development in its current format is definitely not in this long-term interest, and the questions raised in relation to compliance and need to be addressed, and I'm sure they will be by our council. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone in the room, and speakers have all presented well. They all did a very good job in sticking to their time limits, and I think a real wide range of points and issues raised there. And for council, it was as much about keeping the community informed and pushing forward on that basis as well. So there's now an assessment here, or a section here, sorry, acknowledgement of questions from the assessment team. So would there be any questions come forward? Peter?
Just a question regarding what Susan said earlier in the piece regarding council's request for information on the 27th of May. After that dot point, it was moved on to basically approval of the process. Was there any correspondence on or after the 27th of May? Sorry, was there any response to the council's correspondence to the developer on or after the 27th of May?
Yeah, a lot of the documentation that we did receive that was put on public exhibition was then provided. So your water and sewer calculations, the lot layouts weren't altered very at all, to be honest. But a lot of the information that we did request was provided that gave us enough information to actually lodge the application in accordance with Schedule 1 of the regulations.
If I can have one more without hogging the floor. Who allowed the lot size width to be reduced from the 15 metre minimum?
It hasn't been approved yet. So they've put in a request to vary that standard from the development control plan. We have, council through this process have reviewed that, and we've asked for the further information. We're concerned about the solar access as discussed and how that reduction in the lot width will impact on solar access for the future dwellings that will be developed on those lots.
So currently the lot width has not been approved.
No.
Aaron?
Thanks, Adrian. I'd like to understand, or as a group, we'd like to understand why council advised the developer that a landscape plan was not required at this stage of the application. The standard process, given that it's got such an important part of objection, why wasn't a landscape plan required?
Take that one.
Well, the objections came after council had received it. And normally in the smaller ones, this is the biggest we've ever got, we condition it, provide a landscape plan, and no works can be undertaken until council accept that landscape plan.
Okay.
And we just use the same process in this one.
Okay.
And I guess you'd hope that the information coming forward, the statement of environmental effects and all those things would address enough
Sure.
information to support a condition to then support a landscape plan off the back of that, but I don't think that was forthcoming.
Our biggest concern wasn't necessarily having a landscape plan, because we could condition that, we could tell them they've got to put trees and this and that in. Our concern was that the stormwater retention basins that they put in, they classified as open space.
Okay.
And that's operational land, not open space.
The other thing was we've also taken another subdivision, which one of you mentioned, which is the concept and 495 lot subdivision in Mulwala, and we didn't take a landscape plan for that either. But it did show green space and paths on that one, which is great.
No, which is why we've used it as a reference.
Yeah. The difference between those two applications is the landowner was happy to talk to council before it was launched. And we were able to negotiate different aspects of that particular application. But given the strong community views that came through in the exhibition, we have requested the landscaping plan.
Okay, thank you.
Robert?
Could I ask the question, has this development been referred under MREP2 to the agencies?
It was referred in accordance with the agency table, and under that it was only required to be referred to the Department of Planning. They actually rejected it, but then a week later came back to us and asked us to refer it to biodiversity and also to the Heritage Office, both of which we did, and they're the two agencies that came back requesting clarification or additional information.
Because before I wrote my submission, I spoke to the River Murray Health, and they thought that they should be referred because of the risk to the environment of the stored water. And they asked me to CC them with my submission, and they still haven't had it referred to them.
Okay, so under the Murray REP2, that's the only requirement that is required to go to the Department of Planning, but we can certainly refer it off to them for comment.
There's a number under stormwater management which I thought included in DDA, which was requirements to do with water quality.
We can certainly review that.
Thank you.
Yeah, Alan?
Can I ask, is Redlands Road a cleared road under RMS or not?
No. It's not a state road.
The
it's just an
documents
original
aren't
road.
very easy to follow. I'm reading through pages and pages of classifications to try and find.
But it's certainly one of our main
We would
roads.
classify as one of our local distributors.
Yeah, Peter?
The issue on traffic management that was raised and the numbers or the calculations for calculating that traffic management, can council confirm whether or not doubting for a moment that is correct? It certainly sounded correct, that the figures may be understated.
So we have no choice a lot of the times to, if the guidelines certain, like this is Austroads that it's stated in, the 7.4 vehicles per household. If they don't provide that data, we normally use 10. However, the biggest issue with their traffic impact assessment, it only addresses what they're developing, not what the external things are happening in the capacities of any external roads. So they're sending all these vehicles onto Redlands Road, Tower Street, Chisnell Street, Cemetery Road. They haven't discussed their development plus the existing and what that impact's going to do to the standard of the road. And we've requested them to provide some more detail on that.
But the generation rate of 7.5 is based on there being a significant internal traffic generation. There are no internal traffic generators.
Yeah, and that's part of our concern as well.
I suppose, there's a lot of talk about asking people, can we put some timelines on to when we might be able to get some information regarding some of these questions?
Well, a lot of these questions are directed to the developer. So we've already asked for the additional information, as stated before, on the 11th of November last year. We've given them a 3-month window to provide the additional information. So the letter was sent out on the 11th of February asking for that information, and they've come back saying that they're going down the court path rather than provide the information. So if we could provide the information and answers to you, we would, but we really need to sit down and speak with the developer. We're hoping that by going through the conciliation process through the Land and Environment Court, we'll get those answers.
So the timeline, Peter, is pretty much now dictated by both parties in the court setting those key milestones, which are our statements they review. We have those dates pretty well locked in now.
Just one final point on access to green space. I acknowledge that there are 2 tracts of land from both the southern and the northern stages of development. The northern one goes into private property, which has not yet been sold or developed. Has the developer purchased that land yet, or is it still in other hands? Because if that's the case, then there's no tract from the northern stage of development into green space.
So council has what's called a pedestrian access and mobility plan, and as part of that there is an upgrade work proposed along Redlands Road for a pathway, but that is the only access point that we're on public land. I'd have to go back and review our records, our rates record, to see whether it's in whose ownership that other land would be in.
Thank you.
The traffic impact assessment basically says that they will be required to connect their footpaths to council facilities, but they haven't provided us plans on how they're going to do that.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I've just got one question. With Gary Silvestro's report for the Land and Environment Court, is that something that we will be able to see or as a group? Or?
That goes to the court, and depending on what our solicitors advise, we will let you know in due course. All right.
Basically, what I've seen with those, Robert, in other places, they've become a pretty comprehensive just assessment of the facts, and it's not like a legal advice document, so we'd be doing all our can to make that available if we can. But we can't guarantee that, but yeah, what I've seen in the past, they're pretty clearly just a summary of what's going on.
Yeah, no, we appreciate that because we want to work together because this is not good for the community and it's not what the community wants.
Yeah. Sorry, Scott, did you have another?
I was just going to address Robert's question in his talk about the sewage treatment plant.
Yeah.
The maximum capacity the plant can handle is 12,000 people. So it has ample capacity.
So
The concern with the plant itself is the age of the plant.
It's elderly.
Yeah, so we do,
We do need to renew it within the next 10 years.
yeah, and there are provisions in the current long-term financial plan of council to do those works.
So is that hopefully something that will no longer discharge to the river?
It's irrigated out onto the aerodrome land.
Yeah, but once that in a wet year, we still see a lot of water come back down the ground.
Okay, I'm not quite sure what happens from the lagoons or anything like that.
At the time of redevelopment, there will be a review of the licence. As you'd be aware, it's a licensed facility under the Protection of the Environment Operations Act. So the EPA will review all those conditions and that will determine whether we can discharge to waters or whether it should be a land-based application.
Because I've spent my whole life on that waterway and it's deteriorating all the time, and I don't suggest for a minute that it's all because of that drain.
Yeah.
I think it's something for the future that needs to be addressed to try and improve.
Yeah.
Because unless everybody improves everything they can, the river will keep deteriorating.
Yeah, correct.
It's not a drain, it's a waterway.
Yeah, sure.
I think one of the greatest concerns is that the only person that's going to benefit from this development is the developer. There are no positive attributes of this development that have any real or perceived bonus to our collective community. Hence, there is a feeling of anger, distrust that this development proceeds, and if it does, it will be extremely.
I absolutely agree, Peter, and I didn't get a chance to read the final bit of mine on that point. How can we, as a township of friendly, welcoming people, deem it acceptable that some of the community should have access to parks, some of the community should have access to walking tracks and trees and gardens, and some should not, by virtue of how much they can afford? We simply must not let this development proceed in its current iteration.
No worries. That was a lot of really good input. Susan, would you like to just quickly cap the process from here? And
Thank you.
thank you.
So the process from here is council put forward their facts and contentions. That's due this Friday. They will have a rebuttal to that. We will then have a without prejudice meeting on the 31st. Oh no, that's not right. Yeah, 31st of March. And then the hearing date of the conciliation meeting is set for the 4th of May. Through this process, we'll try and keep the community as informed as we can. We will provide what information we can legally. And as always, there will be reports to council. In speaking with our speakers here tonight, prior to the meeting, we will be asking, as part of the conciliation meeting, that a couple of community representatives be allowed to present to the conciliation meeting on the 4th of May. I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in or watching this, and I'd like to especially thank our speakers this evening and all the staff. And we hope that we get quality development as a result of this process for Corowa and the wider Federation Council. Thank you.
Well, that sounds like a really good wrap up. Thank you, Susan. And again, a shout out to Susan and the staff. We've done a lot of work to present this in the best format we can. So, and thanks to our councillors and others that have been able to log on and watch. And yeah, we'll just keep you as informed as we can. So thank you.